Hello, everyone. It is Lisa Alexander, founder and executive director of Stand Up Survivor. Come on in here for another amazing Tuesday Night Live. I'm super excited that you decided to join us tonight for such an important topic. I have an amazing guest, Pastor Neil Shorey. Hey, Pastor Neil, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you, Lisa?
I'm doing good. So I'm just going to share a couple places real quick, but I'm super excited that you said yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes is the right thing.
Yes, I'm glad that you did. Because we know that lives are going to be saved tonight.
Yes.
And that we are hoping that they will be free and they will be healed as a result of this conversation. And so that's definitely our goal. I actually got the opportunity, I'm going to go back a little bit while I'm sharing this, to watch a YouTube video where you talk about your journey through understanding what domestic violence was, and it was really good. I'm actually going to post it in the comments at the end so people can go check it out because it's worth watching. So
good deal.
Okay, yeah, we are ready. So you guys, my guest tonight is Pastor Neil Shorey from the Edge Church in Aurora, Illinois. Illinois. And he is a pastor who is an advocate for domestic violence, which is very rare, I will say. But I'm super excited to have him. So please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah. Hey, so good to be with you guys. Neil Shorey, I've been in ministry since 2002 when I was ordained, right after I got married, and worked in hospice ministry. So I definitely know what it's like to work with people that are really on the down and out. And I've been a pastor in multiple churches in the area. And, domestic violence advocacy is just one of my greatest senses of calling. And I think it's because I got really thrown into the deep end when I was pretty new in ministry. So I've been married almost 19 years, and I've got 3 daughters. So they're awesome, 16, 12, and 12, and they're all doing e-learning. So that's pretty interesting. And super blessed, really thankful for my family.
That's awesome. Married for a long time. He's a girl dad.
Yes, I am.
That's awesome. I am. So as you guys are popping in, we welcome you. Go ahead and tell us where you're tuning in from so we know where you're connecting from. So tonight our conversation it's a bit heavy because we talk about loss and domestic violence, but I think it's critical. So you tell us that you were thrown into the realms of domestic violence. And as I shared on our page, you were the pastor of Stacy Peterson. So tell us a little bit about how you were thrown into that.
Yeah, so I worked at a church in the suburbs of Chicago in Bolingbrook, Illinois, about 30 minutes from where I live now. And I was the counseling pastor for a large non-denominational church. So I pretty much met with people all day long. That was my job. And I really kind of thought that I had seen everything. I probably had a little bit of pride about how, when you get used to seeing certain things and you're like, yeah, I got this. And until you don't. And so one day, a woman came to me at the end of one of our services, and she said, "Hey, Pastor Neil, my name's Stacy, and I'm actually interested in setting up a time to talk to you. I've got a new baby and just got a lot of stress in my life. Would like to talk about some stuff in my marriage." And I'm like, "Yeah, we can do that. So just reach out to me early next week, and we'll get it on the calendar." So that was at the end of 2005 or early 2006. And that's when I first met with Stacy Peterson for what I thought was going to be just kind of run-of-the-mill marriage issues. And I was really, really wrong. Really wrong and very, very unprepared. Seminary, even though I have a master's in counseling, I never had any training in the area of domestic violence. Okay. So really lacking in that area. That's a big problem in our seminaries today that really should be rectified.
It's funny that you said that because that's definitely one of my questions. But hey, Loriana. Hey, you guys from Sydney, Australia, from Canada. Hey, Karen. I'm a survivor. And Pastor Neil is our guest today. He's going to be sharing about his experience with domestic violence. So it's funny you said that you were thrown into domestic violence early in after you were ordained, because you said you were ordained in 2002, and then she came to you in about 2005, you said?
Yeah, about 3 years after I was ordained. And I'd never experienced anything like it.
Hey, Cammie. Okay, so it's really interesting that you say that. And another part of that is that seminary doesn't necessarily train you on domestic violence.
Ooh, not at all. As a matter of fact, I actually reached out to my seminary several years ago, and I offered to teach a free course. And I said, I'll do it. I'll do it for free. Like, you guys didn't have that. So I just sort of figured, like, hey, if you don't have it, I can offer it. And they basically said, that's a nice idea. It's just too complicated to become accredited.
Oh
And
my goodness.
so wrong answer.
Yeah, and I was just saying, like, I was just waiting to see what they were going to say. Hey, Cammie, and I think that really irks my nerves, honestly, because it's like, and is it really too complicated to be accredited, or is it too complicated of a topic, and it makes people uncomfortable, and you're not really sure how to answer it? So maybe that's more what it is.
You know what? It makes church people super uncomfortable. I get it, and I mean, most of the pastors, I try to talk to a lot of pastors about this issue, and I mean, you'd probably believe the things that I've heard, but I've had pastors that are friends of mine. They're good people. They don't have bad hearts, but they're just not educated in this area. I had a pastor one time say to me, "Neil, that's really great that you're into this, but I'm more into evangelism." That's a direct quote. So, and sadly, not uncommon.
Yeah, but you can evangelize to a person who is suffering in their home. They can't even hear you. They're unable to hear the gospel because they're suffering at home. You got it. And it's like, until you're willing to show someone that you truly care with your actions, you're just doing what the writer of James says. Basically, it's the be warm and well fed. And it's like, no, we've got to like get in the trenches with people and show that Jesus's mission. He had a mission to set people free. And if we don't get in the trenches with people, man, we're just missing the boat. There's no evangelism. Said he was hungry. He said he was hungry, and he said, "Okay, go be warm and be fed," but didn't give him any food or anything else.
It's like, if you're starving, I want prayers, but I need some food too. Give me a McDouble. I need something.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, evangelism is extremely important. That's the core of it. At the same time, this is life or death. Yes. We're talking about life or death when it comes to domestic violence. So take us back to 2005. You're having this conversation. You think this is regular marital concern issue.
Yeah. So we ended up meeting the next week. I met with Stacy once, and then she said, well, my husband, Drew, wants to come to the next appointment because that was really good. And I remember sitting with them at a coffee shop. And first of all, gigantic age difference, 30-year age difference. They got together. She was 17. He was 47. Yeah, that's a big issue right there. Huge red flag. But again, I was still pretty new, and I was really taking their word for what was happening. Okay. And so I heard some issues around jealousy, but nothing really raised the level to like huge red flag for me initially. So ended up meeting with Stacy probably 4 or 5 times, Drew multiple times alone as well. And over time, I just recognized there are some major problems going on here. And we had several, there were several intense moments where I recognized, like, I'm not sure what to do here, but I want to get out of this situation as fast as I can. And if I felt that way, I thought, how much more does Stacy feel that way on a regular basis?
Okay. So I have a question for you, because you said you didn't really notice anything at first, but do you think that you were equipped to notice the red flags if they were there? Like, I know you said eventually you noticed some stuff that just wasn't, but do you think that you would have known what a red flag was or what to look for?
I wouldn't have, except I took a deep dive on my own, and I looked for my own training afterwards. So I've got a master's in counseling, and that's okay, but you always have to keep learning. So I recognized what I didn't know. So I sought out, I actually took 2 years after Stacy disappeared, because she disappeared in 2007. I took about 2 years, and I just said, I need to know, what am I supposed to do in this? I felt like there was more for me in this zone. And suddenly I got reached out to by a world-renowned expert in domestic violence named Susan Murphy Milano. And Susan was a force of nature. She happened to live in the Chicago area, and she reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, I saw you do an interview on Fox News. You got time for coffee?" And I just went, yeah. So I ended up meeting with her for about 3 or 4 hours. And honestly, she raked me over the coals for about 3 or 4 hours and just said, "So why didn't you do this? How come you didn't do that?" She said all these things. And then at the end, she said, "Neil, would you be interested in meeting more about this? Because I think you're supposed to be a part of changing the culture of churches to make them safe for victims." And I said, "Yep." And she goes, "Wait a second, don't you need to pray about that?" I said, "Susan, I've been praying for you for 2 years."
Wow.
And she went, "Wow. Okay." So we met on a regular basis.
What I love about Susan is that she ate you up. She literally read you your rights.
Oh,
because listen, as an advocate, as an advocate, there's stuff that just tears at the insides of it. Like, are you kidding me? How did you let her go home with him? Or how come you didn't recognize this? Or how come that?
Yes.
But you don't know what you don't know. I swear, I just want to sing that song. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't.
You know?
And I love that she was willing to just tell, like, I knew she wasn't doing it to be mean. I knew she was doing it because she cared. And her own dad killed her mom in their house, in the house she grew up in. And so she had dedicated her life to this. And because she had so much skin in the game, I recognized, like, this is someone that I can follow and learn from so that I can be an advocate too.
I love that you made that decision. So let's talk about when the final decision, after you met with her probably for the last time or so, and then you find that she's missing.
Oh my gosh.
What did that do to you?
I still remember the morning. I found out she was missing because it was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune.
Okay.
It said something like, police officer's wife goes missing. And a coworker of mine from that church reached out to me. She sent me a text and it just said, Neil, Stacy Peterson's missing. And I remember seeing the text. I dropped my phone. I ran upstairs in our little townhouse that we lived in at the time, and I grabbed my wife and I burst into tears and I just said, Stacy Peterson is missing. She was a friend of my wife in our church, and because we had kids the same age, and it was devastating. And I had shared with my wife things that I'd thought, my concerns for Stacy, but I knew that she was missing at the hands of Drew. And I knew that now I was free to go to the police, because she had asked me 2 months earlier when we met for the last time, not to. I said, what do you want me to do with this information? And she said, I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to know it. She was very clear. And I was uncomfortable with just knowing it. I wanted to do something, but I didn't live with Drew. It wasn't my choice. So how
hard was that? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got, that had to be hard to know what you knew.
It was all kinds of hard. I was unbelievably stressed out during that time. And I was a brand new dad of twins at that time. And I had just started in a brand new church down the street from that church. And I was also serving on the grand jury for Will County at the time. I mean, how you couldn't orchestrate this. Like, this was something that was clearly by divine design, that I just happened to be in that place at that time. And I was serving in week 10 or 11 out of the 12 weeks of serving on the grand jury. And it was, I literally went to the police, District 5 headquarters of the Illinois State Police, and tried to report it. And they wouldn't take my report. I said, you guys have a tip line set up. Like, you're literally asking for information. Like, I've got information. You want to talk to me. Right. And they said, oh, we'll take your number. So they took my number and never called. So I went again. I went twice, and they didn't do it. So it was on the grand jury. An officer comes in and presents to us. He starts to talk. He said, I'll never forget how he said this. He said, ladies and gentlemen of the grand jury, Will County has a Scott Peterson on its hands. And as soon as he said that, I said, hey, excuse me. I made a big scene. I made a huge scene. And I said, I can't hear what you're about to say. I need to talk to you immediately. And everyone looked at me like, hey, that's not your role. I'm like, yeah, just, I had to keep making a scene. I knew that if I heard what he had to say, that I'd never be able to testify. Wow. And so I did. I finally got his attention, finally shared what I knew. And he looked like he was about to have a heart attack.
I bet after pushing you away so many times, Rachel just in the comments, they wouldn't take your report. And so you were able to testify at the.
Yes, it was a long journey. But in 2012, I was one of the key witnesses in the case against Drew Peterson for the murder of his third wife, Kathleen Savio. And Stacy is still missing to this day, and Drew is the only suspect.
Yeah, and that whole thing that you just said is just devastating. It's just waves of devastation.
It was unbelievable, the amount of pain, and I saw it in her family and in Kathleen's family, and I've gotten to know them over the years. And I mean, there's just so much pain that this man has caused, so much pain, and I wish that people like Drew Peterson existed in a vacuum, but they don't. There's so many of them, as you know.
And the not knowing, I think, for her family is just, there's just probably no words for that, of the not knowing, you know.
There's not. Can you imagine trying to take next steps in life, not knowing where your sister was, where your daughter was, you know?
Yeah, devastating.
I can't imagine.
Devastating. So let's talk about that, Pastor Neil, because you talk about dropping the ball. You say that you could have done something. So talk to us about that, because I know that you commented under one of our pictures, our posts, when people talked about, did they go to their spiritual leader?
Right.
And what, 90% said their spiritual leader dropped the ball?
Yeah. And most do. The thing we have to realize is, like, pastors and church leaders, like, we have giant responsibility, because statistically speaking, victims will go to you before they go to the police. I mean, that is, to me, I'm just like, oh gosh, like, that says how much we need to understand about this. And we have to know what we don't know. So if you don't know about it, it's okay to say, I don't know. Now, I encourage you to learn before a crisis.
Okay, hold on. Time out. Hold on. We got to say that again, Pastor Neil. Learn before. I just feel like we live in a world that is very reactive, not proactive.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, they happen. Maybe we should educate. Wait a minute. We know it happened.
Yeah.
Get prepared so you know what to do.
Well, and it's not like, again, it's not in a vacuum that these things occur. It's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men experience domestic violence at the hands of their intimate partner in their lifetime. So in a church of 100 women, you've got 25 to 33 women minimum that are experiencing this, and 1 in 7 men. So this is an epidemic. And, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. But this is one that outlasts coronavirus all day long.
Yep. And this is a pandemic inside of a pandemic, because it was already a pandemic. So we've now forced a pandemic inside of a pandemic. And
it is, they work off of each other. There's a synergy that comes with coronavirus meeting people having to be in isolation. Like, it has been amazingly bad. The results are horrible. I spoke with a shelter that I'm really close to, a little bit north of me, and I asked them in May. I called them in May and I said, can you tell me what your numbers have been like on the hotline this week compared to a year ago? And they said it was 10-fold daily for the week. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, we're coming up with money on our own to put victims up in hotels because we don't have enough room in the inn.
Wow.
It's wild. It's wild.
Wow. So,
devastating. Huge need.
And isolation is one of the biggest tools that abusers use in the first place. So now you have isolation inside of isolation. It's horrible. So I know that you talk about what pastors could be doing in educating themselves. So if you were to talk to spiritual leaders that are watching right now and that will watch my replay, what would you say to them? And I know that you do this training, so we're going to have to connect you guys with Pastor Neil, because if you need him to come and do a virtual training or whatever you need, you got to connect with him, because women and men are dying at the hands of their partners for lack of knowledge. Just because they're not talking about it, training about it, teaching about it. Okay, I'm going ahead of myself.
It's good though. Yeah, you're right. Behavior is designed to control another person. And when you think of it like that, abuse is very large. It's emotional. It's obviously physical. It's spiritual, which is soul destroying. It's financial. It's digital in terms of like controlling online access. It's full of manipulation. It's full of power that's used in a way to hold others down rather than lift others up. And it's the opposite of what we're called to be as people. And it is something that you must know about because it's happening right in your church.
It's happening in your church. Okay, I'm going to interrupt you. Pastor Neil, you gotta forgive me, because when you say something good, I have to jump in. Okay.
No, I can roll with you.
And so statistics do prove that they don't talk about it because they don't believe that it's happening in their congregation.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like no, it is happening in your church.
I guarantee you this.
Or it's happening in your mosque. It's happening in your synagogue. It's happening at your community center. That whatever your beliefs are, it's happening there. No matter how wealthy you are, it's happening there. No matter how poor you are, it's happening there. It doesn't matter your demographic. It's an equal opportunity offender, and it is everywhere, and it's devastating the lives of people that you know right now. Go
So
ahead.
there was a question. Someone said, how do you get through to them that they need the training and are getting it wrong? How do you get through to the ministry leaders that they need this?
Well, in my church, my church is the Edge Church in Aurora. And when I came on staff at the Edge, I made it very clear to the other leaders that this is an area that I'm extremely passionate about. I want to make sure to educate every single leader that we have. So every single one of our leaders, 40 to 50 people, have gone through kind of my domestic violence 101 training, where I talk about what domestic violence is.
Awesome, Pastor Neil.
Yeah, it's just so important. So I'll talk about what it is. I'll talk about some basic steps. I mean, they're just a few basic things that every single person can do. It's not complicated. You just have to be willing to get in the ring.
That's good. That's good. We're not telling you to take a 10-credit course.
Right.
Just sit down.
Although if you want to, that's great.
We encourage that.
Yeah, we'd love
the more knowledge, the better. But
That's
it's not
right.
required for you to understand, to be able to see the signs, to be able to help someone who's in need.
Oh, yeah.
See, the thing is, we're not expecting every ministry leader to be an expert.
Right.
But you can find an expert. You can be educated and aware of how to send it to an expert.
Yes. Every single one of our leaders has the capacity to recognize red flags, to know, hey, if I'm hearing certain things, like if there is an immediate physical safety issue, the first thing you do is not like ask them a million questions to try to be a detective. You aren't a detective. You're a ministry leader or you're a pastor. So what you need to do is focus on immediate physical safety and help and offer that person a place to go where their abuser is not familiar. That's the very first thing that you have to do, because if you don't get that person out of that situation, nothing else matters.
Yeah. Okay. So hold on. I'm going to go back real quick.
Yeah.
The person comes to you, a ministry leader, a counselor, whoever, and they're in immediate danger. We don't send them back home, Pastor Neil. You don't. The immediate need is their safety. So we're meeting their immediate need.
You have to meet that immediate need. You also have to be incredibly ready and very cognizant of tactics of abusers. When I first sort of waded into this ministry, one thing that would happen is I would hear from women all over the country. All of a sudden, they'd read my blogs that were up at the time, and they'd say, I was abused a few years ago, and my parents wanted me to stay with my abuser because, they told me that God hates divorce, which, by the way, is a wrong translation of Malachi, but we can get into that in a minute. Right. So people are held down by their parents, by their pastors. So I had victims reading my blogs and showing up in my church, and they'd say, I'm going to give church one more chance. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, that's incredible. But almost every time that happened, very quickly after that, I would get a really sweet appearing email from their husband. And I'd be like, oh, well, this is interesting. I remember one of the emails. Hey, Pastor Neil, you don't know me, but I'm pretty sure my wife has come to talk to you. And I really need to talk to you about, what's happened between us. I'm really embarrassed because sometimes I do lose my temper. And one time I did push her. I know that you believe in the sanctity of marriage because you're a pastor. So I'm sure you'll want to meet with me.
Oh my God. The manipulation is all through that.
I'm like, yeah, no, thanks. I actually told this guy, this specific person, I said, hey, just for the record, I'm not going to confirm or deny that I've met with your wife. And for the record, if you want to go get help, I advise you to go to a different church because this is not going to be a place for you, because I can already tell what you're doing.
Yep. You can't.
You're trying to manipulate me. You're not going to manipulate me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's touch on this for a second with the domestic violence and the counseling. As a master's in counseling psychology, I have a master's in counseling psychology too. We love therapy. Yes. Go to therapy. But I'm a huge advocate, and I know a lot of domestic violence advocates are. Domestic violence, if there's abuse in the relationship, couples counseling is not the way to go.
Absolutely not, because you know why. What's so important to recognize is couples counseling is for couples that both have good hearts and good intentions towards each other, and maybe they're not great at communicating. That's a couples counseling issue. Couples counseling is never indicated with abuse, because abusers will take everything that they hear and they'll use that as a loaded weapon against their victim on the way out. So abuse will almost always escalate after counseling sessions. And that's why I I go on about this forever when I talk to victims, because they'll say, yeah, but my pastor really wants me to. And my mom said that she thinks that this counselor is really good, probably different than who you know. And I'm just like, yeah, you'll see. I hate to say it, but like you'll find out the hard way if you insist on it. There's a reason why it's not indicated.
There's a reason why it's not safe for the survivor. The
No.
victim, it's just not safe.
No.
So yes, we go to counseling. Doesn't necessarily have to be together, because there's no way they're going to sit there and allow you to tell the truth about who they are and what they do to another person. It's not going to happen. And if you dare to do it, I guarantee there's consequences. And we saw in that post the other day, there are consequences to pay.
Oh yeah, every time. You know, and the thing is, abusers often get more ammo from the counselor. So they start to pick up on how to be a counselor, and you don't want that. It's like, you do not want the person that has been manipulating you and holding you in isolation and telling you that you can't make it without them. Yes. You don't want them gaining skills to use against you. Right. They will weaponize the counseling against you.
And with powerfully too, because they know how to.
Yes.
But I was going to say, and I totally forgot what I was going to say, Pastor. Yeah. I'm telling you what, like that. But it's so important. This is what I was going to say. Pastors need to also know that that's not, okay, y'all come in for counseling. My spouse is beating me. My partner's abusing me physically, emotionally, however, spiritually. Come to counseling. That should not be the first advice from a spiritual leader. Questions have to be asked. If there's any level of abuse, couples counseling is not the way to go. It's not the way to go.
100% every time.
Yep. All right. So let's see. We got some comments over there. They're going really fast. So let's see. So, okay, let's talk about this, Pastor. This is a big one, because oftentimes you have, the black eyes, the bruises, the broken arms, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Oftentimes, as you saw under some of the comments, well, my pastor said that if I wasn't being physically abused, I should go home and pray about it. Right. And so go ahead. You go.
Hearing that, I just want to say, if your pastor has said that to you, I just want you to know that is not God's heart for you. Yeah. That's not God's heart for you. If your pastor said that to you, there's a darn good chance that you not only feel abused by by your husband or by your boyfriend, by your girlfriend, by your wife, but you also now feel abused by your pastor.
Absolutely.
So it's re-victimizing the victim. It's not putting the onus on the person who has committed the abuse. Yeah. And that in and of itself is abusive. So please know that is not God's heart for you in any way, shape, or form.
I have Loriana Newman, she's actually wrote a book about domestic abuse in a Christian marriage. And she talks a lot about the sexual abuse in the church and how her husband he would literally grab the Bible and read out of the Bible, the body, your body belongs to me. Yeah. You're subject to your husband. And I love this. Now, it's a very sensitive topic, and I'm really proud of her for writing about it, because people don't talk about this. Yes. When you get married, your body now belongs to your partner, but they don't have the right to abuse you. And rape and sexual abuse happens in marriage.
Yeah, and you actually get to still decide if and when you have sex. Absolutely. When you're married. You don't get to nobody gets to tell you what you have to do. And if someone is weaponizing sexuality, they're assaulting you. They're not loving you in any way. So if that feels wrong, it's for a reason. It is wrong.
Absolutely. I love that. And the thing about that, Pastor Neil, you can't see that. And a woman is not going to necessarily feel comfortable. Hey, Pastor Neil, my husband's forcing me to have sex. My husband's forcing me. He wants me to do this. They're not going to feel comfortable saying that. Right. So just because they haven't said it doesn't mean, just because you can't see the results of the abuse, doesn't mean it's not occurring.
That's so true.
I'll put the name of the book in the comment section. That's a good one. I can't pronounce your name, and I apologize, but Sobi is your last name. So of course, this one was coming. But what happens, Pastor Neil, when the pastors themselves are the abusers?
Well, it's sadly more often, it happens very often. And I think what we're seeing, because if I feel like about every other day, we're finding out about some well-known pastor that's being exposed for being abusive to someone. I'm not going to get into names, but I can tell you there are a whole bunch that have come out that have been in charge of gigantic ministries over long periods of time, and mega churches since the 70s. And it's a really scary thing. What happens if you don't have leaders that are willing to stand up to that pastor?
There you go.
You're going to have a system that's completely corrupt. And oftentimes you see them surrounded by leaders that aren't willing to stand up, because they also are benefiting from having a position of power. So you have this whole abusive system. that's led by the abusive head.
That's
And,
that's a whole word, Pastor Neil. It's a whole word. They're not talking about it because they're abusing themselves or
Right.
they have other type of sin where they call you out on your sin if I'm doing my own type of sin.
Well, and a lot of times these pastors know that they'll get information on all the other people and be like, hey, are you sure if you call me out, I mean, I know what you did last summer. You know what I'm saying? It's like they'll come at you that way too. So it's very, very dangerous. And
accountability is necessary. Accountability is necessary.
It's not a church if there's not accountability. I'll say that.
I love that one. That was a good one. Let me see what some of the comments are. I don't know if you caught any. They're going kind of fast.
Yeah, let me see.
Feel free. So we're talking about stay and pray, right? So let's talk the stay and pray thing, which just wrecks my nerves because I could leave and pray too.
Right.
Because it's safer if I leave and pray than if I stay and pray.
Right.
I'll let you touch on that for a second, Pastor Neil.
Yeah. Again, it's re-victimizing. It's a re-victimizing tool that pastors will inadvertently, and I say inadvertent because not all are bad. They just think I've got to keep this marriage together. I think what we've done is made marriage an idol. Marriage is designed for people, not people for marriage. So I think sometimes have placed the institution of marriage over the safety of the daughters of God.
Ooh, and I'm sorry, you want to go back on that. We're gonna have to reword that. We placed go ahead, say it again, Pastor.
I think we've placed the institution of marriage over the safety of the daughters of God. And it's interesting because when you go through scripture, you see that religious people have a tendency to do those things because we place second things first and first things second. And, Jesus always addressed people and he cared for people. So the institutions of God are designed for the benefit of people, not people for the benefit of an institution. And until we say that our daughters are worth more than the institution of marriage, we're going to have pure decimation in the path of these hurricanes that are abusers.
Wow, absolutely. And you too, Tommy, I see you out there. The men too,
yes.
Forget about y'all, but we know men are abused as well. And it's a lot harder for them to come out and say it as well. But I love how you just put that, how we put the institute of marriage, of keeping two people together over the safety of the actual individual. Wow.
And it's, it's just wrong. And men, I see Tommy's post because a man, the church taught him that a man doesn't divorce his wife. And Tommy, what I'd say is, it sounds like you were probably in an abusive situation.
Yeah, he's a survivor and advocate.
And so thank you for posting this because there's such a stigma on men. So you're actively breaking that stigma and you're going to encourage other guys to speak up. So thank you for speaking up. Absolutely. You're not the only one. So thanks for leading the way.
Yeah, I love that. That was encouraging. So even if you recognize even if you recognize the flags, if the woman or man doesn't want to leave, how can you help them? Because she says, my pastor was great. My pastor was going to help me leave. He tried to get me to leave for years and I would not. I could not, which I think is more of a powerful statement than I would not. Yeah. Because, and she said, I could not. I spent years in mental, physical, and sexual abuse. So if you can recognize the flags, how can you help a person who's not ready to leave?
Well, I encounter this all the time. It's not surprising to me. So one of the things that I do is I make sure that I never respond to someone who might say that they're ready to go or they're ready to take a next step and then they pull back. I'm never going to shame that person because I know that they're in a hard situation. And what I always say to that person is, hey, the average person leaves 7 to 8 times before they finally leave or something worse happens to them. So if and when you're ready, I'm here. So if you're ready to take that next step, just let me know. So there's no shame in kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's pretty normal because there's so many dynamics involved.
And it's still progress, like you said, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're still moving forward. Tommy said, I appreciate your words, Pastor. It's been an uphill battle. So let's talk a little bit about. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Pastor.
No, I'm just Tommy. I really appreciate you having the guts to post this. So I'm praying for you. Would love to connect with you too.
Awesome. So how about those who have been shunned from the church because they've been divorced for one reason or the other, but we're talking about specifically about domestic violence. Yeah. And it really destroys their faith. It does.
Yeah. Guess what? I think that would mine too. So I would just say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I want to assure you that while I know that's not God's heart for you, that we oftentimes look at people. I mean, people are God's representatives, so people represent God poorly. What I'd say to you is, don't feel a tremendous stress to jump back into another church community. God is big enough to meet you where you are, and if you need some time to break away from that, that's more than understandable. I would too. Yeah, so do not stress about it. He's going to meet you there. He's not going to leave you.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. And I know that's a pastor in you, but I also know it's a therapist in you. So it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to breathe. It's okay to have a moment, because that hurt. You have to process that, you know?
I mean, I've had hurt in churches as a pastor. Like, trust me, I get it. I've definitely had times when I'm like, God, I don't know if I can do this. Like this is like too much. And I've definitely had seasons where I needed to pull back from certain things. So I feel for anybody. Yeah. We're all people. We all struggle with things, and a step back can sometimes be the holiest thing you do.
Yeah, I love that. Cheryl said many leaders don't want their ministry image tarnished, and victims are admonished to cover their partner's faults. And I like, which is so true. But I also want to kind of touch on that when it comes to first ladies or those who are the partners of the abuser, who may be in a high position within the church.
Oh gosh, yes. You know, I hear people talk about the witness of the church, and when victims speak up, like it's hurting Jesus, and it's like no. Listen, you know what hurts Jesus? Abuse.
Period.
That hurts Jesus. That's it.
It hurts one of his children, and he designed that for us.
You know, that's like it's just completely flipped upside down when we say that exposing abuse. No. Sin kills people. Period. You know, it's not the exposing of the sin; it's the sin. So abuse is the shame, not exposing the abuse. And what I'd say is, when there is abuse, it must be exposed, because if it's not, it's a cancer that will not only kill that family, it's going to spread throughout that entire church. Like it's just a complete, it's an illness that knows no end.
Yeah, that was good. I like when you said abuse is the thing that should be a shame, not exposing the abuse.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing that should be abused. I love what Tracy Rector just said. She said, when you got married, you didn't take a vow of misery. You did it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you didn't.
Yeah, and she's exactly right. The abuser is the one who broke the vow. You know, we know this. Like think back to like recess when you were a little kid, and you know, one kid punches you, and then you see another kid punch back, and it's like, wait a second, now who caused that? And now good teachers will look to see what exactly happened. Now, is it right to punch someone back? We know technically not, but we also have to understand causation. And you have to recognize, like, who is the one that started this whole thing? Go to the root. You can't look at just the symptoms.
Yeah.
But yes, it's the abuser who broke the vow. The person who leaves didn't break the vow. They're the one just saying, I'm not going to agree with this abuse.
Yeah. You know, that's really good, Pastor. I got to say, because as a Christian myself, and my faith is important to me, and I didn't want to get divorced. Pastor, I wasn't going to do it. My parents have been married for 53, 54 years now.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to do it. I knew that God, this is what I was told, that God hated divorce. But I promise you one day, God hated divorce. And then I just felt one day, it was like, God loves me more than he hates divorce.
Yes.
And that thing freed me. Let me tell you, it freed me. It gave me the wings to fly, because he broke the vow when he chose to abuse me.
100%.
You know? Because you're like, oh, well, adultery, I could leave for that. Oh, well, I could leave for this. But where does the Bible talk about abuse? Listen, God didn't create us to live in abuse, period.
Yeah, but it talks, but that's what's interesting. The more you dive into theology, so pastors, don't be afraid to dive in and look at the whole of Scripture, and you're going to see that God speaks to this issue. This is not just like, hey, well, it says in Matthew 19 that Jesus was asked about this, and he said, only adultery can you get divorced. No, read 1 Corinthians 7. Read in Deuteronomy. There are multiple places.
Don't just pick one and stop. Don't pick one and stop.
You have to look at the whole thing. And abandonment and abuse is absolutely part of God. It's God sanctioned to go. You are free if you've been abused.
That's good. Pilar, I think Pilar, you made a really good point. Like you just needed help to get out. You didn't need finances. You just kind of needed guidance. I thought that was really good because oftentimes it's not necessarily money. It's someone to hold your hand and walk you out of the abusive situation.
Ooh,
so
good.
Let's talk about teaching domestic violence from the pulpit. You know, statistics are very slim on that. And the statistics do show that it has been an increase in it since the Me Too movement and other things.
Thank goodness.
Right. But most pastors don't talk about it from the pulpit.
Yeah. They don't. And I think it's because people are afraid to dive into issues where they know they're going to get almost instantaneous negative feedback. And we are people, so pastors, trust me, I know we're not supposed to try to preach things to please people, but we are people, and we don't want to set ourselves up to be disliked by people. I think that's part of the reason. I think another reason is that pastors are often lazy theologically in the area of divorce. Almost all pastors will quote Malachi 2 and they'll say God hates divorce. That's actually a very debatable translation, by the way, but no one knows the next part. The very next part, like all pastors know, well, in Malachi 2, it's this robotic, they'll recite it in this robotic way. But what they don't know is that it says God hates a man who cloaks himself in violence. It actually was not speaking against divorce. It was speaking about men who were trying to get rid of their wives to move on to the next person.
Wow.
That's a problem, right? Like the problem is not the victim. The problem is it's the perpetrator. It's the one doing the abuse. So God's not mad at you for wanting to leave your abuser. He's mad at the abuser. It says God hates a man who does that.
Yeah, it's just that's good. Cheryl said, I need them to keep reading. Exactly. Don't stick on one verse and then just talk about that. Because what's happening, it's killing people. It's causing those men or women who are victims of abuse to go back to the home to try to reconcile the marriage. It is literally killing them. I always say life in domestic violence is life or death.
It is. And here's what you have to remember. You can't reconcile with someone that's not repentant. You can't do it. You can forgive them, but guess what? Forgiveness works at a distance. Forgiveness does not mean you have to be in a relationship with that person. And by the way, forgiveness does not mean that what they did is not wrong. Forgiveness doesn't mean that what they did is okay. Forgiveness means that you are saying, I'm going to let go of that toxicity and I'm not going to demand vengeance. What I'm going to do is wash my hands of this and say, Lord, it's in your hands. And I promise you, he is going to, God wants to deal with that person more so than you do. Trust me.
Yeah. It's so funny, right? Next on my notes, I have forgiveness versus reconciliation.
Ooh, all day. Let's talk about it.
Right. So just because you forgive them doesn't mean you have to reconcile with them. Doesn't mean that you have to get back with them. I can forgive you all day and move on and be very peaceful and happy with my life.
100%. It would be, it's absolutely foolish to try to reconcile with someone who doesn't want to reconcile. Reconciliation means that someone's willing to own their stuff, to own their sin. And we know this when we deal with our kids, and like think about when you catch your kids doing something wrong, like you literally catch them with their hand in the Halloween candy the next day, and you said, hey, I said 5 pieces yesterday and you had 48 pieces, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, then they cry and they say, and then you catch them again in the night and their hands right back in there and they cry again. Listen, were your kids sorry? No.
They did it again.
They were sorry they got caught. And here's how you know, abusers can cry just like that, but the adult version. They'll cry and say, I don't know what came over me. Well, I do. It was abuse. It wasn't anger. You have an abuse issue, not an anger issue. Or giving flowers or giving gifts. None of those things matter. You've got to see through and recognize that without changed behavior over a long period of time, not just a little bit of time, like a long period of time.
Change behavior over a long period of time.
Yes, period.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on this. This one is a little touchy for me, and I'm going to say it. Because people ask us all the time, do you think that abusers can change? And I'm going to answer first. Pastor Neil, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah.
I believe God can do anything. Who am I to say that God cannot do anything? He has shown that he can do anything, but the abuser has to decide to change and then follow through with it. So and people are like, no, abusers can't change. Listen, I believe that God can do anything.
Yes.
But as far as the abuser deciding to change, that is 110% on them. All right, Pastor.
100%. I love that question. Can abusers change? Yeah, they can. It's number one though. It is pretty rare.
Statistics are very.
Yeah, it's very rare. Yes, I'm a pastor. I'm not going to limit what the Lord can do. But here's what I'll say: there's one thing that God cannot heal. One thing He can't heal. He can't heal someone who's not willing to admit what they've done. Yeah. And abusers often have a very hard time seeing that they are in the wrong on anything. And you'll see it over and over. There's always a reason that someone did something to them, so they had to do this. It's not true. Yeah. Abuse is not anyone's issue except for the abuser. Yes. And nobody else can change them. Only they can. But if they truly want to do it, I know that God will meet them in that place.
Absolutely. And it's change over a long period of time. Not like change, you've been gone for 2 weeks, come home.
No, we're talking years, years. And the reality is, I know of one person who has changed. One. Over quite a few years of working with victims, I know of one. Because that person really embraced humility and expected nothing of his wife. As a matter of fact, they got divorced. And he still changed and put no expectations on her. He never said to her, "You have to forgive me. Look how much I've changed." Guess what? Someone who's really changed will never say that to you.
You don't have to.
Someone who's really changed will never say, "Well, you have to let me back in." No, as soon as someone starts putting expectations back on you, you can know with certainty they have not repented.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm so glad we talked about that, Pastor Neil.
I love it.
So someone said in the comments, my ex called me a religious freak, talked about how they would use foul language with Jesus's name in it. And they did it over and over and over as a form of spiritual abuse to them. And then, to just say that this was devastating me, it was very painful to hear because they know her faith is really important to her, but he would use it as a weapon. So let's talk about spiritual abuse as far as using things like that in scripture.
Oh gosh. I think what we have to recognize is that there's a long history, going back to the very beginning. There's scripture that talks about Jesus encountering Satan in the wilderness, and Satan is really good. The devil is really good at quoting scripture. As a matter of fact, we're told that he knows it better than any of us, and he's been around a whole lot longer than any of us. So he has had a lot of time to build up his skills in manipulating people. And abusers, I believe, are just like their father, the devil. And that might sound really extreme to some people, like, "Oh no, you're calling them the devil." No, I'm not calling them the devil, but they're being used by the devil. Wow. And what I'd say is, it's not surprising to me that abusers would take passages of scripture completely out of context, but be really convincing at using it to hold down someone who has a sincere faith. And a lot of those things, a lot of those clobber passages are like, wives submit to husbands. That's a favorite. Right. And it's taken completely out of context. It's never, ever meant to hold someone down. It's always meant to lift someone up. Yeah. And those same people who quote that, of course, will never read the passages that say husbands and wives submit to each other. Because guess what? That's what a normal, healthy relationship looks like. It means that I don't have the ultimate say without talking to my wife. She doesn't have the ultimate say without talking to me. Like we're a package deal, and we work on things together. Yeah. So yes, spiritual abuse is so ugly, but it's a trick of the devil. It's been around forever.
Yeah. And it's hard to spot. You're not going to see this on somebody's black eye or arm, but it's hard. Yeah. And that is really, really difficult for those that they can't prove. I know some people often say, I wish he would have hit me, because if he would have hit me, then maybe they would have believed me. I would have had something to show for the,
you know what? And you know what I'd say to that? The truth is, if they don't want to see it, they'll come up with an excuse for that too. Wow. They'll say, "Oh, did he just hit you once?"
That's true. That's true.
And it's like, it's what religious people do. Religious people without a grounding will often put these heavy burdens on other people. It's like, well, we would have left, but hey, let me tell you what you should do. It's like putting this big list of shoulds on people. It's devastating to hearts and souls.
So we had a couple questions that Yeah, she said, Trey said, oh my God, I prayed for him to hit me because then the truth is, it would make so much more sense. If I come to you, Pastor Neil, I say, he's hitting me. You're like, oh my goodness. But I said, Pastor Neil, he curses me out. He calls me out by name. He's disrespectful. He's using the Bible, the verses in the Bible to manipulate me. He's forcing me to do these things in the bedroom. I don't know what to do, you know?
And again, I'd say to everybody watching, if any of those things are happening to you, if your significant other is getting you confused about your own reality, he's using gaslighting against you. He's trying to get you to just buy into whatever he says. That's manipulation. That's abuse. If your husband is controlling all of your finances and you have to ask for $5 to get something, that's abuse. If your husband has all your passwords, but you don't have all of his, that's abuse. There are all sorts of things. If your phone is being tracked, but his isn't being tracked, that's abuse. If there's a GPS on your car and not his, that's abuse. Bunch of problems.
It's so frustrating. I'm passionate about this, so I try to keep it, hold my mule, but it's so true. And the thing about it, nobody talks about these little things. Talk about they shouldn't be having all your passwords or a tracker on your car or questioning how many miles are on the car. Who did you talk to today? Don't wear that. All of that stuff is not normal. It's not in a healthy relationship.
It's not.
He does get it, Tracy. He does get it. Okay.
Sorry, I was going to say something. One of the things that you can recognize right in the start of a relationship. Sometimes I think we think that jealousy is kind of cute when we're young because it's like, oh, if they're jealous, that means they're really into me. No, what it means is that's the first warning sign for abuse later in the relationship. So jealousy is not cute.
Nope.
It's not something, whether you're a 7th grader or you're 75, jealousy is not cute and it has no place in a relationship.
Absolutely. And it will grow. It will continue
every
to
time.
Grow. It will get worse. So we had some questions that I have for you. So one of the questions, I'm trying to condense it a little bit.
Yeah.
How to not have a hard heart, because I told the church, this person told the church that they had their abuser was abusive to them, and they actually promoted their abuser instead of demote or, chastise him or any way. How do I deal with a hardened heart with that?
Wow. That's a great question.
Hold on. I get love and forgiveness, but to promote them and hide the sin, hide what they're doing, hide the abuse, and it's still happening. How do I function with that?
Man, there's, when leadership is all colluding in that way, the very best thing you can do is walk away, because the Spirit of God is not honored in that place, and you won't be either. When they promote abuse, that God is not being honored there. No matter what they look like on Sunday, no matter how much they sing or lift their hands or dance, God is not being honored in a place where abusers are being promoted.
Hold on.
Yeah.
God is not being honored in a place where known abusers are being promoted.
100%. They absolutely have to be removed from position.
Yes.
The church needs to know about it. It can't be hidden. They can't just move on to another church. People need to know what happened. They need to know what happened. And that person needs to be removed from that congregation, particularly when they're a leader. There's a higher expectation on leaders. So if a leader is abusive, that person must not be allowed in that community until they've gone to a qualified batterer intervention program. And they have walked through all the steps that they need to actually see change. Because if they're there, anybody who's been abused will be triggered by that person. And that's not okay. That's not a safe environment for anybody.
So how, if I'm in a relationship married to someone who is a leader in a church, who do I tell? Who do I talk to and let them know that this is happening? I'm afraid. Who do I tell?
Well, I think it probably depends on the leadership structure in the church. I think if it's an independent church, I would encourage you to go to a ministry leader that you actually trust. It's still a risk. There's always risk that person might not handle it properly, but go to someone that you've talked to before, someone that you believe you can trust. That's where I would start. If there's a denominational hierarchy, go to someone outside of that church that's above it. That's where I would go. Definitely, you're not going to be able to trust that this person's friends are going to be able to investigate him. That it doesn't work that way. You got to go outside of that system.
So many are Suffering in Silence. I know Tracy Rector's on here, and she's a producer, but she's also an author, and talks about a glass house, living in a glass house. And as First Ladies ministry leaders, you're living everyone's watching you, but nobody really knows what's going on inside the home. And that's got to be one of the worst feelings ever, because who do you tell? Everyone's looking at you for their healing. You're the pastor, you're your pastor's wife. They come to you for everything. Right. And so that's got to be really hard.
And it's interesting. There's a parallel here, because Stacy Peterson felt that way because Drew, her husband, was a sergeant in the Bolingbrook Police Department. And she knew what happened when his previous wife called the police on him. The police were called 18 times on Drew Peterson in his own department. And guess what? He was never arrested, but half the time his previous wife was arrested. So
18 times.
18 times.
Pastor Neil, you're trying to get my blood pressure up tonight.
Yeah, mine's already there. So we'll
18 times and wasn't arrested, but she was arrested.
She was arrested half the times. Like 9 times Kathleen Savio was arrested. So because guess what? They backed their boy. And it was wrong and sick. So this happens. The church leadership can operate in that same way as police officers.
Notice some of the people were saying the same thing. Oh, my husband was an officer. My husband is an officer. I'm afraid. They support him. They back him. They're not going to help.
They do. And the very first person that I helped along with Susan Murphy Milano after Stacy Peterson was another police officer's wife. And her husband was police officer of the year in Will County. He had a great reputation. And he regularly said to his wife, I will make what Drew Peterson did to Stacy look like child's play. And I testified against him in divorce court.
Pastor, you're getting my blood pressure up.
I know.
So upset.
But that's why we're doing this. We gotta keep talking. We gotta keep talking about this.
We have to get the bullhorn, shine the light.
Yes.
Because because you're in a position of power does not give you the authority, whether it's a pastor or a police officer or whoever.
It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. It shouldn't matter who you are.
That's the key. It shouldn't matter.
It should, but it does, right? We know it does.
It proves that it does.
It does. But we can do more. Having conversations like this is so important. And we can always do more together than alone. So let's figure out, let's think of some new ways to make a difference. Right. Let's make some headway.
Absolutely. And I know that you're a trainer at Document the Abuse. You guys, I had Nora Peterson on, Drew Peterson's sister-in-law a few weeks ago. And Document the Abuse, I know that is a tool that you use. So definitely, you guys, it is in the comment section.
Yes.
So you said you trained. One of the questions was, does your church have a domestic violence support group, and do you think churches should?
Well, that's a little bit tricky. So churches definitely need to have people that are trained, but oftentimes,
I like that you were trained. I feel like you answered that earlier because you've trained your people.
They're trained, but it's tricky because oftentimes people in a church want to go to a community that's a little bit further away so they can feel more free to be open about what's going on. So I always recommend, there's a woman in the Chicago suburbs named Paula Silva who has a ministry called Focus Ministries, and it's awesome. And she created this ministry years ago after coming out of a long-term abusive marriage. And she was looking for support groups. And guess what? She didn't find them. So what did she do? She said, I'm going to be the answer to my own prayers.
Wow.
And
Where is that?
It's all throughout the Chicago suburbs. So
awesome.
There are support groups that she has designed. She's awesome. She's wise and kind.
All right, I'm gonna get the information from you and have it put in the comments so you guys can check on that
for sure.
Connect with her. Let's see. Lenny, as a pastor, what was your initial reaction when you found out about the abuse? I asked that question already. Okay, so I don't have any other new ones to ask. So if you could tell pastors anything, I know you talk about the regret that you had with the whole Stacy Peterson thing. Besides training and anything else, is there anything that you would tell ministry leaders and pastors, especially when it comes in the realm of, it's not physical abuse, but it's still abuse.
Right. Wow. What would I say? I'd say probably the same thing that I teach everybody in my Domestic Violence 101. The very first thing that you can do, the single greatest thing that you can do as a ministry leader is to validate victims. The single greatest thing. People need to be listened to. listening is a lost art. And if you can listen well, you automatically stand out because everybody has a Twitter attention span. You know what I'm saying?
Wow,
Like nobody listens. So when you listen and you really look at someone in the eyes and you're not trying to think of the next thing to say, like you make a difference in someone's life. And victims haven't been listened to. They haven't been believed. So we need to listen to them. So listen to them. Pastors offer connection to victims. They've been isolated for so long. They don't even know what is up or what is down because they've listened to the voice of their abuser for so long. And that's by design. That's not by accident. That's by design. So offer them a connection in a small group, offer them connection in a domestic violence support group. Those are super important. And I always say, and it's what I do with Document the Abuse, is help them to tell their story. That police officer's wife that I mentioned just a minute ago, when she came up the steps, up the walkway to my church, and I met her there with Susan, I'll never forget. She had PTSD all over her. It was evident. She was trembling and her head was on a pivot looking back and forth because she thought she was being followed. And we got to the room where we actually sat down to start helping her write out her story. And she took 4 hours to get all this down. But I watched her over 4 hours start to become empowered. I watched her sit differently, and she was making eye contact with us, and her voice got stronger. I mean, really, it was a cathartic experience. It was powerful for me to even get to be in the room. It was a holy experience with this lady. And by the time she left, all of her problems weren't gone.
Right,
but she was on the path to becoming victorious and no longer a victim. Wow. So to me, it was incredible to get to see that.
I love that. I love that vision of that alone. I had a couple of weeks ago, I had on Bill Mitchell. Actually, last week, he talks about when dating hurts. And he said something so good, similar to what you said, where he said, become an expert at listening. Begin to listen to what people say. And people will say more than you ever imagined if you just listen. If you're concerned about someone being abused, listen. Ask questions that allow them to continue to answer, your question.
One of my ministry mentors, his name is Fran Lehman, and he's also in the Chicago suburbs. It was the first church that I worked at. And I remember sitting down with him one time, and he said, one of the best things that you can do to find out about someone and to love them well. And I just even hearing him say it like that, I can still hear it. He said, sit down with someone and look them in the eyes. And he said, and just very slowly say, tell me your story. I want to know who you are.
That's good.
And you know what? You don't have to say much. You just have to listen, take it in, and you're going to remember. They're going to say things, like you said. They're going to say things about their lives that you'd never be able to learn unless you actually listen. And do it for a long time. Just listen.
I love that. And I love, one of our biggest things is finding your voice. And Pastor Neil, I started this because I had to find my voice. Like you just said, when someone comes to a pastor, we don't know who we are. We're literally broken down to the shreds of a person.
Right.
And so slowly, people ask me all the time, I just slowly found my voice. I slowly started to tell my story. And I literally did that thing, like that woman, the story you talked about was officially broken down. And now I'm probably too extra. But
totally not too extra.
But I have to use my bullhorn because someone's life depends on this. And I meant to comment on it earlier, but someone just said they got healed from listening to us, revelation for them and healing from this conversation. And that is literally what our prayer was and our goal was. And so to know we've helped to help somebody get free, we just love it. It's amazing.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, you deserve to be free. I'm so thankful that you use your voice in this way. I'm committed to doing this. I'm not going to stop. Can't stop, won't stop. We got to keep going. No sleep till Brooklyn.
That's right. Let's go, Pastor Neil, because you know what? It's life and death. The churches are the biggest, the biggest hospitals ever. They are, or supposed to be. Yeah. And so when our people are coming broken, that's the place that they're supposed to find healing. So let's do what we need to do to let that happen.
Yeah.
I've kept you longer than I usually keep my guests. I don't know if anybody has any last minute things.
No,
Pastor
this
Neil,
was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Pastor
you.
Neil, okay. They want to know if you have a program. What's your take on parental alienation and domestic violence? I read a little bit of what he said earlier.
Yeah.
He was the victim of abuse, and then now the wife keeps the children away from. And I know that happens on both genders. So
it does. It's vicious, and what I've seen is that courts are often not very well educated in how to address this, because courts get groomed by abusers just like victims do. And unless you have a judge, and I found it to be unfortunately rare, unless you have a judge who is educated in the dynamics of abuse and domestic violence, they're going to fall victim just like everybody else does.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true. I remember I was in the courthouse with my ex-husband getting a divorce, and I had pictures of the abuse. And I said to the judge, I said, Your Honor, please. I said, he's been abusing me forever. I'm showing. He's like, and he looks at me and says, so what do you want me to do? And any voice that I had was gone out. And of course, I'm hysterically crying because I'm looking like the crazy person. And he's just calm and he's sitting there. And of course, I'm the crazy person. That's how it works. But if they're not educated, it really literally continues to re-victimize. And so what we don't want is for that to also happen in the church, that it's supposed to be the safe place.
So you're exactly right. And this woman that I helped ended up telling me her story. So this police officer's wife came in, and the very first woman that I helped after Stacy Peterson. And the thing that I didn't share was that when she walked in, we asked her what made her decide to come. And she said, 10 years ago, I walked into my Catholic church, and I got the courage to tell my priest that my husband had been raping me daily at gunpoint. And as soon as I said that, he stood up and walked me to the door, and he told me to pray and to submit to my husband. That was my cross to bear. And she said, that day I decided that my voice didn't matter anymore, and I was never going to speak up again.
Yeah, that is the worst. That's the worst.
And she said, I decided today to speak one more time.
Wow.
And the courage that it took for her to do that. Listen, maybe people on here are watching, and you felt held down, and you haven't had anybody believe you. I just want to tell you, I will believe you. I know that Lisa will believe you. There are people who will believe you. We're not going to question you. We're not going to try to poke holes in your story. But we will assist you. And there are other people that will assist too. So just know you're not alone. God sees you. We see you. There is help.
I love that. Thank you, Pastor Neil.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thank
that. You know, and I want to, that was a really good point. I was actually going to end there, but I just want to say something about what you just said. You said how she went to tell the priest, and he said, go back.
Right.
And so it silenced her voice again. Already silenced voice was again re-silenced. And thinking that you had another opportunity. What if she didn't have that opportunity? What if she didn't find you? What if she didn't make it that far? Sometimes I think ministry leaders need to understand you may be that moment that saves their life when they come to see you.
Yeah, and it's like, this is the mission. This is such a powerful mission. Like we're called to be there for people in their lowest moments. Yeah. And when we do that, we never look more like the Jesus that we represent. So when we tell people to submit to abuse, we're saying that the sin that's been done against them is okay. And it's not. It's not okay. You're supposed to be free of it. So give people who will listen to you a chance. We will hear you. We will believe you. And I see other people right in the comments saying that too. I love what Cheryl wrote. I will believe you. There is help out here. So yes, totally, Cheryl. We will believe you too.
Haley said tears. Thank you, Pastor.
Oh gosh, Haley.
His church is in
God bless you. Yeah, God bless you, Haley.
Yeah, his church is in Aurora. No, it is. It's in Aurora, Illinois.
Yeah.
So thank you, Pastor Neil. I'm not going to keep you much longer.
No, this is awesome. This is. I mean, I think you can tell I care about this a bit. So
you're definitely passionate about it. We appreciate it, and we appreciate the position that you hold, being passionate about such a topic and such a taboo topic at that. So I thank you from everyone who watches, and thank you so much. We'll see you guys later. We'll see you next week. Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Don't go anywhere. Okay, Pastor.
Okay.